It is clear to me that the common denominator between projects, especially those worked on by Tetsuya Nomura, is the name Jack. First, Jack Skellington in Kingdom Hearts 1, and Jack Sparrow followed in Kingdom Hearts 2. It wasn't until Kingdom Hearts 3 that the Jack theory had a valid thread to follow, as Demyx's physical appearance as well as the features of Daybreak Town match that of Type 0 Jack and Academia. In this Renaissance period of Kingdom Hearts, the release of Neo The World Ends With You again hinted at Jack, using Ryoji of all trades, especially with a card suit motif being seen throughout the game. Now we can apply Jack of all trades to one of Final Fantasy's most iconic jobs, Red Mage. Finally, Stranger of Paradise introduced Jack Garland. This came as a massive surprise as speculation was already mounting surrounding the name Jack. Additionally, Jack Parr, who has a polymorph superpower, is seen as a medal in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King, opened one of 7 doors to another world. Christmas Town was something Jack could have never conceived until he accidentally stumbled upon it. I think this is like the Master of Masters, who observed a world he could not conceive while writing down his foresight. The Master was likely just as excited as Jack Skellington to discover this new possibility. You see, what is special about Jack Skellington is that his movie story did not begin in Kingdom Hearts 1. Upon arrival in Halloween Town, you may notice that the Heartless are unresponsive. This is because everyone in Halloween Town is among the living dead. There are no hearts pumping to course blood through the veins. In Kingdom Hearts 1, it is explained by the mayor that Jack found a book that describes the Heartless and how to make a heart. Where exactly did Jack find this book? And could this be the sought-after Book of Prophecies?
What vexes all men? So amusing. The sea? Sons, the dichotomy of good and evil. A woman.
A woman. He fell in love.
No, I heard it was the sea he fell in love with.
Same story, different versions, and all are true. See, it was a woman that's changing and harsh.
What has he got if not himself?
Was too much for this. Not enough to
To say the things he truly feels, and not the words.
Literally.
I really want to emphasize what is being discussed in the clip. Tia Dalma explains that the thing that vexes all men is a woman. Of course, the woman which Davy Jones fell in love with is the selfsame woman explaining this, Tia Dalma, who is the sea goddess Calypso. Davy Jones put his heart in the chest so he could live forever. In comparison, we can tell that inside the black box is indeed some kind of heart. Perhaps, though, it is because of one whom the Master of Masters loves that he has set out on a twisted mission to be reunited with a lost love. Davy Jones's role was to ferry souls of those who died at sea to the afterlife. Jack Sparrow owed a debt to Davy Jones. In exchange for captainhood of the Black Pearl for 13 years, Jack must serve aboard the Dutchman for 100 years. Jack Sparrow is someone who cheated death. Likewise, the Master of Masters, who claimed to have dimmed, vanished, and faded, has all but apparently cheated death as he's seen in the future. He is a dead man walking. After defeating Davy Jones, it becomes Will's duty to live at sea as the captain of the Dutchman, cursed only to be able to visit Elizabeth once every 10 years. Sound familiar? This is the same as Sora and Kyrie's star-crossed love. In a similar vein, upon a sunset view of the ocean, Sora fades away, once again out of Kyrie's reach.
A life that's full. I traveled
Most of what I know from Type 0 Jack comes from Nanaki BH. This character has such a striking resemblance to Demyx that you can overlay their character models and see essentially the same person. Though Jack appears to have a lackadaisical attitude, his smile is just a front for a stoic and deadly nature. His cheerful attitude betrays the fact that he forgot how to feel a long time ago. Compared to the Master of Masters, Jack's disposition rings with a similar overtone. Jack draws upon the power of ignorance. There are multiple meanings to this. One is to have a still mind in the face of chaos. Another is a veil upon knowledge to hide the truth. After I jumped to the conclusion that the Master's name is Jack, the release of Neo The World Ends With You introduced Ryoji of all trades. This, of course, was a play on the phrase Jack of all trades. Ryoji isn't typically employed. He does all manner of odd jobs around Shibuya, but mostly serves as a shop for pins you can't find anywhere else near the Shibuya Hikari. There's not much to say about Ryoji other than his questionable employment. His design includes a wing and arrow heart tattoo, which is indicative, again, of Jack of Hearts. Ryoji does have a keen sixth sense, allowing him to be more interactive with Shibuya's underground than most normal people. All Keyblade wielders are like red mages by default, as they utilize both melee attacks and magic. While all characters have their own styles that resemble other Final Fantasy jobs, Keyblade wielders generally resemble this job. A Master of Masters, who is a master of the Keyblade, could be then technically referred to as a Jack of all trades, all jobs mastered. Jack Parr has yet to debut in Kingdom Hearts in a playable world. However, he has already been featured as a medal in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. I believe these medals can be a strong indicator for what we can expect from the future of the series, as they were made from the Book of Prophecies. I believe Jack Parr will be one of the last hints before the Master of Masters reveals his true name. Jack Garland's story, as the origin of Final Fantasy, allows the entire franchise to reconnect to Kingdom Hearts by retroactively introducing its motifs into the origin story of the Final Fantasy multiverse. It appears that Ash, Jed, Neon, and Sophia, Jack's companions, gave up their forms to embody darkness and become the four fiends from Final Fantasy I. At many times in Stranger of Paradise, I got the feeling that Jack Garland himself is the Master of Masters. Perhaps that is a bold claim to make, considering their starkly different personalities. Yet, if I had to picture the motivations for the Master, I could only characterize him by Jack's plight. It may never be necessary to specifically show us the Master's story within Kingdom Hearts. Jack is motivated solely to defeat chaos, and I think his motivations align simply with the Master. Of course, Jack does have greater ambition, but for most of the story, he doesn't have the memories to know why he's on his quest. In the interest of time, I only chose to review 7 Jack characters. However, there are many more, and I encourage you to review their backgrounds. Marluxia was the Jack of Organization XIII. Jack was a close friend of Cinderella. Honest John is a deceitful lowlife who tries to take advantage of Pinocchio. He was originally intended to be featured in Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. John is a variant of the name Jack. Alleyway Jack introduces you to Tetramaster in Final Fantasy IX and is a variation of the Dimensional Warrior Gilgamesh. Hans, who is seen possessed by darkness in Kingdom Hearts 3, is also a variation of the name John. He is the youngest of 13 brothers and is quite a manipulative jerk. Jack of Hearts is a colossal monster from Nier Automata who bears a striking resemblance to the Darkside Heartless. Missing Link is an augmented reality game. The game will function with a Google Street View type overlay. The structural layout of Scala ad Caelum will reflect the structural layout of your location in real life. You don't, however, have to walk necessarily to new locations in real life, like something such as Pokemon Go. The worlds have not split up during this time. To reflect a change in scenery that is indicative of different Disney worlds, the developers are testing alternative scenery and textures and how to apply them to the map. The use of augmented reality may be indicative of a special middle ground between reality and fiction present in terrestrial Scala ad Caelum. Terrestrial Scala ad Caelum is not unreality and exists in a time directly after the destruction of Daybreak Town. Trophies or statues replace medals as a means to use abilities. Earth magic has also been officially added to the roster, completing the Final Fantasy Elemental Wheel. This game, once again, will feature a customizable player character, as well as a multiplayer experience. The stars in the night sky warp at the arrival of a certain character. This may refer to Brain. However, it is worth noting that Brain did not arrive in Scala ad Caelum at night. Perhaps it is a phenomena that happened after his arrival. Perhaps another traveler arrives, or this line is out of context and could refer to Subject X arriving in Radiant Garden, who arrived at nighttime. Many times we ask ourselves, how exactly did Ephemer repopulate? The fact that his time machine fizzled while departing at the same time as Skuld's suggests that he had a female companion available to repopulate. This would make sense if we analyzed terrestrial Scala ad Caelum through the lens of Eden. But Eden actually refers to the paradise of Radiant Garden. Luxord and Abba's names clearly mirror Adam and Eve. The story of Norse creation better fits the narrative. In the story of Norse creation, 3 male figures create the first 2 humans, Oscar and Embla. What is important to realize about this is that these first humans were made from wood that had washed up upon the shore. Though Kingdom Hearts does not directly say it, replica vessels, which are puppets, are made out of wood. Recall that Ephemer had the Book of Prophecies with him. This book, theoretically, would outline Vexen's replica research and how to make real humans out of nothing. The Norse deities who gave life to the first humans consisted of Odin, Honir, and Lodur. Each bestowed the first humans, Oscar and Embla, with gifts of life. Of course, there were 3 known direct survivors after the destruction of Daybreak Town: Ephemer, Brain, and Luxord. At an unknown point in time, however, Brain was warped forward in time to the era of terrestrial Scala ad Caelum. Odin blew into them the breath of life, while his 2 companions imparted mental activity, a healthy complexion, and the ability to speak, hear, and see. My interpretation of these gifts are as follows: the mind, body, and heart. Missing Link takes place 4 generations after Master Ephemer lived. Ephemer would be reasonably old enough to be the cloaked man who took Xehanort to the island and consequently died there. While it may appear the mischievous Master of Masters would make for a Loki, YouTuber Joystick made an astute observation that Ericus and Xehanort take the place of Loki and Thor in the Norse mythos. Kingdom Hearts 3 made it a point to include Zeus, the Greek Allfather, and the God of Thunder, While you could compare Zeus to Odin as an Allfather, Zeus has more apparent similarities to Thor. Zeus and Hades are brothers and make a direct comparison to Ericus and Xehanort. Xehanort was instrumental in bringing Sora to the Afterworld. In Kingdom Hearts 3, we also briefly see Athena, Hermes, and Apollo, who have been shackled by Hades. While the three may resemble Aqua, Ventus, and Terra, we could also theoretically apply them to Xehanort's friends, Vor, Hermod, and Bragi, or Baldur. The incarnation cycle is explained as follows: the goddess of wisdom, the messenger, and the son of the Allfather. As confirmed by interview, Missing Link introduces the direct concept of nobility and a two-tier society. With the blend of real-world features, the story behind Missing Link could take a turn that addresses more tangibly real concerns. I'd like to introduce my top 5 picks for Disney properties in Missing Link. While I personally have yet to sit down and watch Prince and the Pauper, I believe this Mickey Mouse movie suggests a theme that we already are on the pulse of, that someone out here has a look-alike, and they could take advantage of that to swap places. It's worth remembering Tarzan, as he, like Xehanort, was an infant raised in isolation on a remote island. Tarzan was considered as the missing link between humans and gorillas. We can note that the wooden structures on Destiny Island are much like the treehouse made by Tarzan's parents. Additionally, Deep Jungle was not used in Chain of Memories due to certain complications. This world is a missing link in the chain of Sora's memories. Pocahontas strongly relates to the namesake of Fabula Nova Crystallis, meaning Story of the New World. The European settlers to the earlier Americas were said to have come to the New World. WALL-E demonstrates a world of ruin, and the journey for robots whom represent Adam and Eve to ensure humanity can return to Earth. WALL-E's plant represents the hope for humanity's return, much like how I reasoned earlier that replicas would be made from wood. Princess and the Frog would be a welcome addition. Besides, after Final Fantasy VII Remake's amazing Toad forms, I could only hope to go Gungaga for it in Kingdom Hearts. Demyx may be characterized by nobility, and his laziness and love for music shares a similarity to Prince Naveen, while Luxord's fate-dealing powers share more similarities with Dr. Facilier. After all, it is clear that he has friends on the other side. Do you know how to win at any wager? If you go into a match knowing you'll win from the get-go, then it's not a wager. If you know you'll win, then what's the point in betting? I am always considering the possibility of losing. That is what it truly means to be a gambler. Of course, when you attain that level of strength, you will never lose big. Knowing when to walk away is another important component of gambling. You cannot simply stop after one match. You must fight again and again. Only when the final play is at hand do you know the result of your bet. So you see, losing here today does not mean I've lost entirely. While one yet lives, there is always a chance for victory. And finally, the best gamblers do not gamble. There are those who would wager their lives on a bet. They bet it all on greater rewards, risking greater losses. Perhaps it's not a game to them. I would not recommend playing against an opponent like that. Although, I have managed to win against such opponents. It requires immense strategy, so I would perhaps not say that I often come out on top, particularly in recent times. You should not endeavor to turn the tables at the last second to bring about crushing defeat, but to steadily rack up smaller victories along the way. Now then, who shall I wager with today? Luxord is the trickiest character to identify, and the original Organization XIII member most shrouded in mystery. He is number 10, X, or Kai of the original Organization XIII. With the dichotomy of the black goat and white goat, Xigbar is elementally associated with space, and Luxord is elementally associated with time. Kingdom Hearts logic tells us that a third person may complete their trio. This third person would represent Antimatter, the way the Pokemon Giratina completes a trio between Palkia and Dialga. Luxord is a trickster or stage magician. According to mythology.net, a trickster is a character who uses wits rather than strength or authority to accomplish his goals. Like heroes, tricksters usually come out of their adventures unscathed, having won the prize they desired and upset the regular social order in a way that will cause lasting effects for the people around them. Unlike heroes, tricksters are morally questionable. They may lie, cheat, or steal to get what they want, and their ends don't justify the means. These slippery characters don't set out to save the world, they set out to get what they want. Luxord's name, like Lushu, includes the word lux, which was a substance collected by Keyblade wielders in the Age of Fairy Tales. If you took out the UX as a reference to Union Cross, you'd simply be left with Lord. Luxord's name, as written, is a reference to the Luxor Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. The resort includes an incredible pyramid structure as a reference to the casino's namesake. Luxor is in Egypt and was once the location of the city known as Thebes, as well as the Valley of Kings. I feel the skein of Severance in Kingdom Hearts XIII was highly inspired by these ruins. Alternatively, there was also a Thebes in Greece. This Thebes was clearly a location in Kingdom Hearts III, and also the world in which Luxord confronted Xigbar, or Lushu. This could also lead into referencing an ancient play known as Seven Against Thebes. If you've been following along, you'd know that sounds significant towards 7 versus 13. 7 versus Thebes is a 7 versus 7 story about twin inheritors to the throne and the conflict that ensued due to the greed of one twin to breach agreement and keep the throne for himself, and the desire for revenge from the other who was exiled from Thebes. Luxor could also reference to a tile-matching puzzle video game. This game happened to have released in 2005, to which Luxord also made his debut in the same year in Kingdom Hearts II. The name Ludor references to play or player. Loder is an ancient Norse figure that was around at the beginning of creation, yet strangely absent from the rest of Norse mythology, especially due to the real-life history's incomplete information. I am uncertain if it will even matter which his name is if it comes down to it, as the only difference between these two names are the position of the O and U, which are phonetically similar. If I had to wager, I would say it would be Ludor.
Serendipity. It was a place that ancient minstrels sang of in joyous ballads. It was a palace that knew neither day nor night, an endless now of joy and amusement. It was said that only souls who had perished in an unfortunate manner were granted entrance to its halls, to be allowed a brief flash of happiness before fading into their final rest. But there are always exceptions to the rule. In a moment of cosmic whim, a certain misfortunate father stumbled through Serendipity's doors, still very much alive.
Of all the Disney villains in Kingdom Hearts, Oogie Boogie is one whom strangely enough shares a Final Fantasy job class with Luxord. I feel this strongly implicates a connection by allegory. If I am correct in assuming that the Master is the Jack of Hearts, or even like Jack Skellington, Luxord or Loder is his foil. I think it's possible Luxord knows about the Master of Masters' plans and has been keeping his cards close, as his true mission is to stop him. Luxord didn't care about Xehanort's Keyblade War, and was more than willing to play the role of one of the 13 Darknesses. He cared about what came after. It would be remiss not to mention one of Tetsuya Nomura's first Final Fantasy character designs, Setzer Gabiani. Setzer was very simply used in Kingdom Hearts II for the Struggle minigame challenge in Twilight Town. Interesting that he would particularly use Setzer in the game that debuted The Gambler of Fate. Final Fantasy VI's character arcs are very brief narratives, as the development team divided character designs to 2 characters each. Nomura created Setzer and Shadow. Setzer is a gambler who attempts to kidnap Celeste from the Opera House, but the tables are turned when the party rather wants to use his airship. Later, in the World of Ruin, we learn that Setzer tragically lost the woman he loves, Daryl, and hid away her airship in a tomb. Perhaps it is the case that Luxord is the one who lost someone he loves. To be honest, I still don't have an answer for the wild card. There are a few cards in the deck I could surmise it to be. I've heard the idea floated that it could be used as a medium to return Sora to his own reality. A wild card would depend on which game Luxord is playing. In some games, spades are wild, and in others, hearts are wild. Jokers are almost always wild, and sometimes they're taken out of the game. And sometimes, aces are wild. Luxord is capable of hiding himself upon the 2-dimensional space of the cards, as well as trapping others within them. What is possible with a wild card will depend on when and how it's played. Be forewarned, I will discuss a hard spoiler for the movie Lightyear here, as it is highly relevant to this last claim. In this movie, the real villain is none other than Buzz Lightyear himself, from an alternate timeline. I believe that both Xigbar and Luxord are Lushu. The way they question each other's identity has Spider-Man meme energy written all over it. This would be made possible by an effect produced by hyperspace travel and a variation of choices made in separate timeline events. In one outcome, Lushu follows the Master of Masters' instructions without failure. That would be the life lived by Xigbar. In another scenario, Lushu decides the Master's ambition is wrong and decides to stand against him. There are a few methods of how this split possibility occurs. Lushu can read the Book of Prophecies and try to alter time. He can travel at a high velocity, the way the arc allows a body to achieve hyperspace. Or, he could be subject to a paradox effect, enacted by abnormal time travel, such as the magic doors featured in Kingdom Hearts 2. The Master of Masters tells Lushu to abandon the notion of time and what separates our worlds, aka space. Both of these are the elements which characterize Luxord and Xigbar. He also tells Lushu that he doesn't want him to cause temporal paradoxes by reading the Book of Prophecies and thereby failing his mission. If Lushu is the so-called traitor, then this label can only be achieved if he did cause a temporal paradox. If it's one thing Luxord doesn't tolerate, it's cheaters, as his weapon is aptly named Fair Game. Learning about the many characters named Jack, or specifically learning about the Jack of Hearts, the Master of Masters has at the very least cheated death. The biggest lie the Master ever told was that the world would fall to darkness, and that's how the Book of Prophecies ends. Yet we know Sora changed the future without reading the book.